Da 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 da! What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes, get those notifications out, let people know I've gone live. And in the meantime, if you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. I didn't have much time for either today, in all honesty. Today was a listing day, and I got it all done, pretty much all done, and made a few sales in between. It makes me feel that, I have a little bit of say and control over how I'd like to put that roof over my head. I have always, worked for somebody else. I've managed, grateful to get myself to that point of supervisor or manager, but to actually be able to have that say in your own life, not to have that breath on your neck, right? That that it what really comes to mind in this moment. Let me grab a book here. This is one of my favorite thought leaders. I actually got to meet the gentleman a couple of times, right? And this was one of the books that he wrote in this idea, built to serve. And I've given it a lot of thought over the years, on this book and on the title of the book, because I always felt like I was built to serve, right? I was brought up to serve. And it is a entrepreneurial book. It's actually about finding your purpose and becoming a leader, right? That you were born to be. But when you're built to serve, when you're actually programmed in your life to serve, you don't really get to have that say, because even though you are serving, you're always still answering to yourself. And that's not always a bad thing. I was actually talking to a new subscriber to my channel. I don't know why, but I do attract a lot of caregivers. And in that appreciation of understanding, I don't want to be that person. If I give to somebody, if I care for somebody, I want to do it out of my own steam, my own choice, right? Not to be dictated to say, this is what you need to do. This is your position, right? This is your list of things to get done or to learn, and to build on somebody else's expectations rather than building on my own. And, for lots of people, we are brought up to think that that is selfish. But it doesn't have to be, because, even though I feel strongly, right, my whole life, not woke to any of these ideas at all. I have always been sheep herded. I have always been directed in what to do, even as a supervisor or a manager, you know, even as a leader. You have leaders, right? Even as a leader, you need to be led in what you don't know. And I recognize that for myself, but at the same time, I feel guilt and shame when I'm trying to be my own person, right? When I am trying to make movement and choices for myself, when others still have that expectation. And we can't help to feel bad if we are truly caregivers. Hello, Eugene. I missed you last night, I do believe. Thank you so much. I hope you're having a great night too. And I always appreciate that thumbs up when you come into my live. But for myself and for others that find me in this story that each one of us gets to play out, that somehow in this digital age, we are connected, and it's so much easier to bump into people that we feel that connection to, that familiarity to, those common interest and those common beliefs sometimes that we sometimes and somehow we get magnetized to each other. And I think a lot of that has got to do with this digital age, right? That it makes it easier for us to say, oh my goodness. And that's funny I'm saying that too, because I've recently bumped on to a new content creator, and I got hooked on her content and her heart at the same time. And I would consider her a caregiver in what she does because she's out there and she's doing her own thing. And yes, she's her own boss and putting a roof over her head, but her intent is truly to help others find their way. And she was talking about that a little bit herself, I think. This lady that actually popped into my channel today is truly a caregiver. She takes care of her own family. And she's been delving into my content, and in delving into that content, she spent some time in the comments, and I've been getting to know her. And she talked a little bit about her family and how her entire life she has been a caregiver, right? In those expectations of others and in not using discernment and being able to have that time for herself. Same with me, my whole life, always serving others, not taking credit in that, right? Not even feeling good in what I was doing because especially in my own family, it was like an expectation, right? It wasn't something that was meant to feel like, oh my goodness, you're so amazing, Cindy. Thank you. Thank you so much. But if that caregiving wasn't filled, right, in those expectations, well, that guilt and shame would surface in the acknowledgement that it wasn't going on. I would like to do more of that caregiving, but it is in that discernment, it is in that feeling the people and the situations out and say, how much of myself can I give? How much of myself am I willing to give? Right? And how much of myself am I looking forward to giving? I feel that I am a caregiver myself. And the most amazing thing about that now is that I enjoy doing that. I enjoy sharing what, I've come across in my own experiences and my own understandings and those things that slap me upside the head and go, oh my goodness. If I didn't know that, who else out there didn't know that, right? I'd like to consider myself an entrepreneur, right? I'm not quite making a living in what I'm doing, but I believe you get what you give, right? And being a caregiver, and because I understand, right, that somehow I am attracting a lot of caregivers, and possibly they were made to be caregivers. They were trained to be caregivers, and not necessarily it was something that they wanted to do, but it was something that they fell into. It was something that they felt they really had to do. And yet, in the end, They find the joy in what they're doing. They found that they mattered in doing that. And I think that's absolutely incredible. And I actually think, possibly, maybe this is why I am so consistent in, at the very least, showing up every day, because it brings a sense of value to my life, right? And lots of people out there don't have that. They don't feel that they matter. They don't feel like they have anything to give. And yet, they're caregivers, right? And they don't even recognize what they bring to the table, what value they bring to the table, or the fact that I believe that the caregivers get a free in because of that caring and that helping and helping to actually get people to move, to make life easier for others. And they don't even recognize that in the end, they're doing that for themselves too, right? Because that's what we're supposed to do, is to help each other along the way. Now, for myself, and if you guys have hung out with me for any length of time, I call it the little drummer boy. Then the story, the little drummer boy. Jesus was born. And I'm not a religious person when it comes to the Bible and everything, but I do believe that whoever or whatever is in charge distributes all those little gifts in all the different religious denominations or the spiritual ideas and in thought leaderships and entrepreneurs, right? That they sprinkle it everywhere specifically so that we can mingle with each other. And when we mingle with each other, when we take interest in each other, when we serve each other, when we're the example for each other, we rub off and we get to discover, if we wish, new truths. New truths, right? It's just a matter of being willing to listen or sit in a different perspective, to actually contemplate and pay attention to others. I have been, what do you call that? I have been an observer, right? My entire life, a spectator my entire life, right? Not always being welcome to the party, always being at the sideline or against the wall, but paying attention. And in that, we can learn so much. It is how I've come to discover, right? That one truth that I live by. It takes all kinds to make the world. But if we're not willing to mix with others, if we're not willing to look and listen to different perspectives, if we're not open or willing to sit in, how are we ever going to discover all those amazing gifts that are out there in the world? And we can learn, right? And we can be smacked up by this side of the head by a truth that is so far beyond where we're actually supposed to be in the moment, right? Or where we think we're supposed to be in the moment. Because in truth, right, we're supposed to dip our toes all over the place. That's so amazing about this age of AI learning. You can travel the world from your desktop, right? You can explore different ideas, different political ideas. You can understand different leadership from everywhere. And there is so much out there that we can take in. And not necessarily, right? So little of it do I absorb as a truth for myself. But it's amazing that we can learn from others because we learn who they are, right? What base values they have. And we can judge and feel it out for ourselves, whether that's a truth for us, if that is somebody or something we'd like to learn a little bit more about or be close to. But when we're so steadfast, right? This is why I am steadfast, and we can be steadfast in our beliefs, in our truths for ourselves, but be steadfast in something your parents loaded on you, right? That this is the truth, or a cultural idea, or a political idea. And that really does mess us up. And sometimes it serves too, right? That this is where etiquette comes into play. I don't swear, right? But this was a perspective of my father that swearing was not allowed in the house. Now, is swearing bad? It's an expression, it's a voiced expression. And we can read into that too, but you can't go, oh my goodness, look at that. I cannot learn off of that. Well, I have favorite thought leaders that have the worst potty mouths ever. And it's in my choices whether or not to take in a lesson from them. And along with that swearing and vulgarity, right? That's going to rub on me because we are who we surround ourselves with. But if you have those ideas and those beliefs and those truths for yourself, nothing can get through. It's like armor, and it makes it possible so that you can sit in conversations with people who are so different. And that is the truth. We have to use our own discernment, right? And yes, we make mistakes in that. We, right, as caregivers, we do not give ourselves our own time, right? This is something I've learned to come to understand and appreciate it. Every September, I take time off for myself, right? And I go away and I go away by myself and I just enjoy time and space and mother nature and new cities and enjoy road tripping and beautiful landscapes. That's all for me, right? And I create it just for me as a gift for that caregiving, that consistency of showing up every day. I also take Saturdays off. And sometimes I get anxious because I want to come in on Saturdays, right? Because I'm not giving myself that creative outing, right? I'll say, okay, Saturdays we're going for a walk. So I do on occasion, right? But the only thing that is a requirement out of that Saturday off is that I am not showing up online. There is no responsibility for others that day, unless it's my immediate family, right? And they need something done, they need help with something, right? If we're going out to a movie or shopping, and that has been slowed down quite a bit, right? It's wintertime, we're locked in. So on Saturdays, I usually just stay offline. Tomorrow, I've got people coming in, I've got sales to drum up, but you do what you do in that moment. And that's the same idea, too. Is that a day off for me? Not necessarily, but we prioritize in the moment, right? Because if it's your day off and you have an accident, you're just going to say, "Oh, it's my day off. I'm going to deal with this stomach ache, which happens to be appendicitis, tomorrow. I'll go see a doctor on Monday." Right? It's your day off, right? It's still a necessity to take care of those priorities, those things that do come to the surface. But you can make that up in other ways. I'm a true believer. If you misstep in how you treat somebody, or you misstep in how you treat yourself, you can be creative and find ways to make up for that. We live in a time of AI learning. There are no secrets anymore. And there's going to have to be a lot of stumbling over obstacles. There's going to be a lot of having to make up for the wrongs in our life. And a prime example of that is in these little YouTube shorts. There's a new app out there called cheaterbusters.com or something like that. And what it does is they take a picture of somebody and they search the internet to find the cheaters in their marriages and in their relationships. And right, these relationships are being totally blown up, right? Right now is the best time to course correct and get off, right? And these are businesses, right? These are businesses, these apps. But it is the perfect timing right now in this era that we live in to start clearing and cleaning up all that clutter, all those missteps in our lives, right? And make up for them, right? And make them right. It doesn't mean to go back to a happy marriage, but if you're unhappy, that doesn't mean to go off and play around and come home and give diseases to your wife, and she's not even getting them checked or treated because, right? These she's in a marriage, she's in a relationship. It's not even crossing her mind, right? So it's important for us to do course correction. Nothing is not seen anymore. And that is a truth. And, it's unfortunate. Like, even when you walk down the street, there's street cameras, right? You go and rob a grocery store, you can guarantee you're not going to get away with that. When, as even 20 years ago, right, it was probably guaranteed you would get away with that. We have to be very discerning, not in just in what we get right, but what we get wrong. And think twice about it. And if you do misstep, right? Guilt and shame will tell you if you have, right? Because you'll feel it. I know for myself, I misstep in any way, I feel bad, and I'm right. Sometimes I tread water to do a little bit of course correction in that. And sometimes we don't have that opportunity to do that when we do wrong to others, right? That sometimes that someone has passed away. Sometimes that person is moved on. You have no idea. It's not like you're going to track them down. And it's actually part, I think, of, when you go, I've never been to AA. Drinking was never my thing. But, I think it's part of the 12 steps is to go about and to try and make amends, to, at very least, apologize and try and make up for those wrongs that we've done when, right, we knew very well in those moments. For myself, right, I understand where I got it wrong. Sometimes I can course correct with that person or that company or in those relationships. Sometimes I can't, right? And I have to accept that I might not ever be able to make a wrong a right again. But at the same time, being willing, right? I'll take responsibility for that. If not in the moment, if not in the next 10 years, if not even um, when I'm not able to do it for the person that I hurt or did wrong with, that sometimes we can make it up by doing a right for somebody else, right? A little something for somebody else and just say, this is this, and just know for yourself that, you did that because you can't make a right for somebody else. But it's just not doing it because you got caught or you will get caught, but do it for yourself, knowing you just don't want to be holding on to that. You don't want that to stop you in your life. And maybe you'll get away with it, right? But maybe you won't. And I think in this day and age of AI learning, we're not going to get away with too much. Yes, maybe it's a little bit of invasion of our privacy, but also you have to understand it's in the majority, right, that we move. So if you choose, right, maybe you want to go live out in the bush on crown land, no internet, and live your life the way you want. Survivalists do that all the time, right? But if we want to be a part of this community, which is in the world, and in the world that's even more expanded now because we're this close to each other, no matter where we live in the world, unless you're one of those uncontacted Amazon tribes, right? And even them, they're having these contacts now. And yeah, we have to be very careful about that too, because we know what happened when the Europeans came or the Spanish came to North and South America, right? Just introducing new diseases to a population that have never been in contact with that we can wipe a whole community, like a whole population. And right, we almost wiped out, I think, the Canadians here, the indigenous, we almost wiped them out with smallpox and diphtheria, and there was another one, can't remember in the moment. But how do we make up for that? We do our very best, right? Sometimes we can't have that opportunity to right or wrong. Another example is, you've heard probably that Canadians had problems with the residential schools and taking the indigenous children from their homes and their tribes and bringing them into European style schooling, very strict, and just strip them of their culture and their heritage. We can't do anything to make that fixed, right? Because trauma is trauma and it affects us for our entire life, and it just doesn't affect us. We were talking epigenetics yesterday, right? We just pass that down to the next generation, right? And it becomes a serious problem. But we can apologize. We can put out programs out there that will help to benefit and make things a little bit more accessible and available. We have, different days that we celebrate. Here in February we have Louis Riel Day, uh, and we have in September, I think we have residential school day where, you know, everything is shut down, right? And it's a considered a holiday, not a holiday. That's a terrible way to put it. It's a day off with no payday, right? Nobody gets paid for that day, and it's so that we can have remembrance of what happened, so that we don't do that again, right? If they had AI learning and right those lights and cameras in every room, like that wouldn't happen in this day and age, would it? Right? It would never have even, but because they knew they could get away with it, right? And they didn't quite get away with it, right? Time caught up, the story passed down, right? And to be able to have these platforms and not just keep it in the small communities, but it is now out there for the whole world, right? And it's a mark on our country here in Canada, right? This is a it's a bad mark on us. But I think, in that story being played out in the different programs and in that respect and in righting the wrong and recognizing the minorities out there, that we are, right, making a wrong, maybe not 100% right, but a little bit better and possibly a little bit more forgivable, where we can actually, right, hold that understanding that it takes all kinds to make the world. And then possibly somewheres down the road, this word minority, right, will be non existent, because we can just say we're only human. We're all humans. And it's true, we're all humans. But we were also talking yesterday about, when we don't feel good about ourselves, how we want to drag everybody down with us, make everybody else feel bad because it makes us feel better, makes us feel superior, makes us feel like we got one up on somebody else, right? And I think those days are coming to an end, and we're just like 20, 25 years into this, people. Can you imagine what the next 20 or 25 years is going to open up to, right? Will it be a can of worms, or will it be something beneficial, or will it be a fair balance, because innovation also arises and moves faster because of this age of AI learning, no matter what category: science, medicine, thought, leadership, cultural ideas, religious ideas, spiritual ideas. Oh my goodness. If it wasn't for this age of AI learning, I wouldn't have made one step forward, and I would have found myself back. If you anything like me, I believe Cindy's not coming back, but I believe there are parts of me that will. And I would like to think that, that we're going to get it right, that we're going to make some movement for ourselves and create a better world out there. And that wouldn't have happened for me, at the very least, if it wasn't for AI. I would never have stumbled onto what I was supposed to stumble onto. I believe I was supposed to receive these gifts. I was, you know, being the person that I was, that I spent so much time on my own, that I would have never, ever in my wildest dreams bumped into some of these people with these insights, these understandings, these truths. because my world was so limited. And, right, I believe that nobody, right? How could any of us have guessed 20 years ago that we would be here right at this moment, right? I don't think very few of us. I don't think very few of us. But we're here now. And I think we're going to move very, very fast. And it's to each one of us to have that discernment as to what's true for ourselves because everybody is vying for our attention. Everybody is. And you have to feel out what is true for you because what's true for you is what you're going to pass down to your kids and your grandkids because we're human. That's our nature, right? We are who we surround ourselves with. So I think it's a pretty good thing that we're each one of us is able to expand ourselves if we want to, even our own children and grandchildren, right? We do. We know how they move, but at the same time, right? We understand they get to live their own lives. And I think the best way sometimes that the children learn is by being the example for them and going back to that cheaterbuster.com or whatever it was called, right? What kind of example is that to your children, right? They're going to grow up and do the same thing because it was okay. Daddy did it, right? And what does that do to that institution of family? We, right? I never even knew anybody divorced. Never. When I was growing up, it was not heard of, right? I never knew anybody. None of my friends ever had parents that were separated. Maybe somebody had passed away, but divorce. And I think, big part of it was women's liberation in the 60s and 70s. But it's important for us to experiment, right? So I'm not judging in that. And possibly it was a failed experiment in that. I believe it probably was. But how do we know unless we try? We can't sit in bad relationships. We can only choose better ones. And if divorce was available when I was growing up, it quite possibly might have been a good thing. I don't believe my parents were a very good match for each other. I think they caused a lot of damage for themselves and for their children. It's why I'm here right now in that course correcting, right? But again, it's just in each one of our choices. And, again, in this age of AI learning, we're not going to get away with it for too much longer if we're getting away with it at all right now. Okay, you guys, let's pick a card. If you guys don't know, I have a deck here. It's 54 powerful words. And I go in, pull a word, we go into it for a few minutes, and then we call it a night. Sometimes it's a few minutes, sometimes we get into it, but right? We'll let it decide for us. Okay, you guys, here we go. Maybe it'll be pertinent to what we were talking about tonight. Yeah, discernment, very important, right? Discern for yourself, discern a situation, right? Discern the people in your life, right? In before you're speaking. And that's hard for somebody who comes in and just goes live. So I have to be, see, I go into that flow. So it just comes out. But, I come into my lives afterwards, and I watch the lives for lessons for myself too. And if I felt that I really outstepped myself outside those boundaries that was acceptable, or I hurt somebody, that I would have to find a way to course correct that. Accidents happen, mistakes happen, failures happen. That's okay. But it's about getting up, brushing your knees off, right? Taking responsibility and accountability if we were the ones that messed it up, and do a little bit of course correction in that. And I would be right back the next day to stumble over myself to explain. But going into the flow, right? I just trust, right? I trust. And it very rarely fails me, in my opinion, right? But everybody gets to have their own opinion, right? That's what discernment is, right? Feeling out the truth for yourself. Okay, you guys, here we go. One word. Here we go. We'll take this one in the middle of this little stack. Oh my goodness, this is so good, you guys. I think we got this card last week, so let's just try a different perspective this week. Purpose is to just keep moving forward. Purpose is to just keep moving forward, right? Never give up. Keep trying, right? Stand up, brush your knees off, try again. Another wrench gets thrown into your life. Doesn't matter, right? And it might be hard work, it might be scary work, but because you hang out with me, we do this in baby steps, right? It doesn't mean that it has to be done yesterday. Sometimes we're going 100,000 miles, right? Oh, sorry, 100,000 miles an hour. But I think for the most part, right, we are couch potatoes. We are couch remote control kind of people, and we don't make that movement, right? And we kind of end up purpose lacking in purpose, right? I was trying to say that word, but in the opposite way. Purposelessness. Right? And sometimes we can give up in that, right? Because we're not making any movement at all. Sometimes, right? Even going into spectator mode, right? And not spectator mode on, right? Survivor and Price is Right, but spectator mode in paying attention to the world, paying attention to the people in your life, pay attention to your own decisions, right? And it's true. Purpose is just is to just keep moving forward. I had something else in my mind in that. Maybe it's progress, that word progress I think we had last week, right? And I changed the card because of this word just, right? But it is true. Purpose is to just keep moving forward, to just keep going. If you have to slow down, you slow down. It doesn't mean not to take a rest when you need a rest, right? I mean, caregivers, they need a rest. They need that time for themselves. You take that, but be responsible, right? In not giving up on yourself, in understanding that, if you stop, sometimes it's hard to get started again. So if you just keep moving, right? Just keep moving in whatever you dream for. Set some goals for yourself. How would you like to see your life in 10 years? It doesn't mean what you're getting and wishing for in 10 years. It all has to be done tomorrow. But what can you do today? That was one of the very first lessons that I learned, you guys. And it's a good one, right? I don't like to be surprised by those 360s in my life where I just get whipped right around and find myself where I start. I don't even like the 180s where I get whipped around and get directed onto the other end of the spectrum because that can be scary. Those different landscapes, those different experiences. I would much rather make those small adjustments myself and just take a nice soft 45-degree turn in my life. And then maybe I won't get whipped around in those 180s and those 360s. Okay, you guys, that's my good cheer. Thank you, Eugene, for popping in tonight. Everybody, have a great night. And we'll see you Monday, unless you guys want to come in on Sunday night. I have great moderators, a great crew over there. They chat more than I do. We would love to have you Sunday night. Come in and say hi.